And now here we go again.
It's time. Time for another episode of those shit-talking guys. Full of opinions on games, music, cultures, and other random shit. All while humiliating each other. This is Generation Flip. Don't forget, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. And now, wrapping it up, here's your hosts.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Today we got a good show. But first I want to introduce my co-host, the bald and beautiful Big Brown.
How's everybody doing today? I'm excited about today.
Join with us today. We got two wonderful, successful guests for our segment break. The Silence is what our segment's called. I'd like to welcome back to our show, Generation Flip, Director of Clean Institute, Rebecca Mendoza. Also, we'd like to introduce the one and only Miss DORCHEN LEIDHOLDT. You guys, first I want to take off a second here, a minute to thank the viewers. Thanks for stopping by, checking us out from time to time. We do have, we talk about good topics here, good real topics and whatnot, and real issues. So successfully we reached, we're going to be reaching our final season, right, Brown?
Yes, sir. Yep, we're getting close to that. Yep.
We're getting close to our final season. And so, for those who haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Also we have live comment in the comment box. You go ahead and chime in if you like to ask some questions to Miss LEIDHOLDT and Miss Mendoza here. So today's topic, again, we're going to be talking about, breaking the silence for domestic violence. It's a big issue. I also have some news on at my workplace myself. Big Brown, take it away.
Yeah, no, I think, definitely want to enlighten everybody on what is going on in the real world. A lot of times from day to day, we take it for granted. We don't see the things that are going on behind closed doors. And I think one of the nice things about our shows, we'd like to bring out important topics. And I feel this is a very important topic. I have two daughters. I hear it all the time, but it never gets put out there. And one of the nice things with Miss LEIDHOLDT is that she's definitely going to enlighten us on what is going on a day-to-day basis, and an important issue at one. I know we always like to have fun and we like to do our things, but we also want to bring to attention things of this importance: of female rights, women rights, human trafficking. A lot of this stuff goes, overlooked or underlooked, I should say. And it's time that we do things. And one of the nice things about Miss LEIDHOLDT is she's been doing this for 30 years. She's been dedicating her whole life to this. And when we sit here and we try to bring up accolades for her, it's 2 miles long. And I really can't go through all of them, but I can tell you, she got her master's degree from the University of Virginia, New York University Law School. She's completed all that. She's written many books. She's a staple in the world. It's not just the United States; it's the world, from the UN, from all over the world. So right. I'm excited to hear stories. I'm excited to hear what direction we're going in, and also I'm excited to find out from her the very beginning, what got her involved, what made her want to go that direction, and have we gotten better?
Right.
That's the thing. Have we gotten better since from the 70s to the 2020s? With social media out there, with all these things that are at everybody's fingertips. If you can type it, it'll spit it out. And I think that's important to know from an advocate like herself, is if we are getting better, and if not, we better make that change. So enough of me talking. Let's get to the ladies.
She's the dazzling activist and leader in the feminist movement against violence against women, represented hundreds of women victimized in inmate partner violence, human trafficking. Like Brown said, please welcome the dazzling DORCHEN LEIDHOLDT. Welcome to the show, Miss LEIDHOLDT. So let's start by where you started off from. Back in the 80s, I believe it started out. You've been doing this for a very long time, correct?
Absolutely. For decades, starting when I was about a teenager, really. When I, 19, 20, 21 years old, I became aware of the fact that there is a real problem for girls and women in our society. And gender-based violence is pervasive. It will touch the lives of the vast majority of women and girls, often in ways that are devastating and life-altering. And I wanted to be part of the solution. And at the same time that I was having this epiphany, there were thousands and thousands of girls and women around the world at a similar place, and a mighty movement was born.
Right.
It really started in the 70s with a recognition that rape is not simply an individual misfortune of an individual woman, but it's a systemic problem that is impacting all women and girls, even those who are fortunate enough not to experience rape. I came to New York City at the age of, right after graduate school at the University of Virginia, at the age of 23, and I joined an organization called New York Women Against Rape that counseled individual survivors, but also did a lot of educational work, and really hit the ground running, and I haven't stopped ever since.
Awesome. That is
Awesome. That is awesome.
I'm going to step in real quick, Ms. Leidholdt. I was talking with Rebecca earlier, and a lot of times we like to do our homework prior to shows, and to find out some accolades and things like that. And it was funny because trying to find anything on you that's not been done is impossible. You've done it all, and thank you for your service. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. You always want to find that one question, and you're like, I think she's did everything. And we thank you for that. It's so important for you to keep that live, that vigor, and making sure things are okay for women. Like I was saying earlier, as a father of two, it's important to me everything that you're doing. So thank you again. And a question I really wanted to ask you is, when you came to New York, was it a passion that you had way prior to that as a young lady, and then coming into New York and seeing everything that's been going on in New York? Because New York, I've been in New York several times, and I could just imagine what really goes on behind closed doors in any big major city. But really, how many people come out and try to? Is there places out there where they can get help, or there's so many of them trapped in there where they just deal with it?
Well, those are a lot of questions, but just about New York, there certainly is a lot of gender-based violence in New York, and it's been at its height during the pandemic. I don't think it's a New York City specific problem, however. And we can spend some time. I'd really like to talk about the pandemic and what happened in situations of intimate partner violence during this time. But I think I mentioned that I went to graduate school at the University of Virginia, and UVA, it's been in much of the news over the last few years, had an enormous problem of gender-based violence, of gender discrimination, but of violence against women. Fraternities were very powerful on the campus, and young women were getting sexually assaulted. They were often being encouraged to drink a lot of alcohol, left in very vulnerable positions, and were subjected to sexual assault on campuses in the hallowed halls of the University of Virginia. So it's not a New York City specific problem. It's really a national problem that is happening everywhere. And there is certainly, especially since the advent of the Me Too movement, there's more awareness, and there is some accountability. Many of you may be aware of the fact that today Ray Kelly was convicted of multiple counts of sex trafficking for trafficking, I believe it was 6 extraordinarily vulnerable young women and girls, and there were probably many, many more victims out there. But this is a problem of national scope happening in every part of the country, whether we're talking about rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. Violence against women and girls is alive and well. And while I came of age at a time when movements were developing, a movement to end rape and sexual assault, a movement against intimate partner violence, and more recently, a movement against sex trafficking. There's much more awareness, but the violence itself continues. And during the pandemic, I think in some respects, it was as bad as it's ever been.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I did.
Yeah.
I did get a glimpse of the trial of R. Kelly. I grew up on his music. Very talented musician, but it's unfortunate that he took a turn for the worse for his self and his career. But again, also, for the victims that were involved, my prayers and hearts go out to them because they suffered a lot, and it's not acceptable. I don't accept that. I don't. America shouldn't accept domestic violence and sexual assault like that, and trafficking, human trafficking, and stuff like that. We shouldn't tolerate that stuff. Also, I wanted to ask you, Ms. DORCHEN, is that I was reading on your profile. Do you also take in consideration for women who are incarcerated as well? I mean, because they go through a lot, with the correction office and stuff like that in the system.
Well, I'm so happy that you raised that. I actually co-chair a group called the Incarcerated Gender Violence Survivors Initiative. That's a big name. But what we do is we represent incarcerated women who have survived domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking in cases where that violence figured significantly in the crimes they either committed or are accused and were convicted of committing. And it's interesting because gender-based violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, often victims who don't get the protection they need end up in situations where they try to defend themselves. Sometimes they may be brought into criminal activity by an abuser, but they end up incarcerated pretty much because of the abuse that they suffered. And our prisons throughout the United States are filled with women in that situation. There's been a lot of research done on women prison populations, and estimates are that well over half, in most instances, it's about 80% of incarcerated women have experienced severe domestic violence, often going back to their girlhoods. So we are hoping that society will begin to wake up and recognize that fact. And we need to affect a lot of changes. First of all, in the prison conditions, a lot of women, as you pointed out, in prison are subjected to continued violence, sometimes by correction personnel, sometimes by other incarcerated people. They're often in conditions where they are over and over again are re-traumatized. For example, subjected to, imagine a sexual assault survivor being forced over and over again every time she meets her lawyer to a body cavity search. I mean, can you imagine what that does to that survivor? Right. And they're not given the programming and the resources that they need. And very often they are serving extraordinarily long sentences. And as we meet with these women, oftentimes we realize they never should have been incarcerated in the first place. And I'll give you an example of a survivor who was just released on parole, a mother of 5 children who lives in New York State. And her situation was she fell under the control of a very abusive boyfriend who was threatening to sexually assault her daughter. And ultimately she participated in his murder. But after years and years of brutality, she was repeatedly sexually assaulted by him, battered by him, and as I mentioned, threatened by him. In fact, the violence was escalating, and I think there was a real risk that he would kill her, but she participated in the killing of this man and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. She has just finished serving her 20-year sentence. We were able to assist her in her parole proceeding, and she was released wonderfully the first time she came up for parole. She's back at home rebuilding her life. But,
Right.
you know, what was accomplished by this mother of 5 serving 20 years in prison? Think about the cost to the taxpayer and the cost to her family. There's another case that we're involved with involving a young mother of 2 little children, boy and a girl, in upstate New York, who killed her intimate partner with his own gun. He was torturing her. He was actually sexually torturing her and videotaping it and putting those tapes up on Pornhub. I mean, it is the worst, most egregious abuse you can imagine, and threatening her. And they wrestled over his gun. She shot him. He died. The court sentenced her to 19 years to life. Fortunately, our initiative was able to provide her with representation on appeal. And on appeal, we persuaded the appellate court to apply a new law in New York State. And other states around the country are considering laws like this. It's called the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act. And if you can establish that you were a victim of severe domestic violence, and that violence figured significantly in the crime you committed, and you're serving a prison sentence, the court can resentence you to a fraction of the time that you were sentenced to. So we prevailed in this appeal, and this young mother, while she had been sentenced to 19 to life, she's now going to be eligible for release in a year and a half. So,
Wow.
so we can make a difference if we persuade our legislatures all over the country to pass laws like the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act. And if we can persuade pro bono lawyers, the legal community, to take on these cases pro bono and provide representation to survivors. So we are seeing some changes. And this is one
Fantastic.
area where I am very, very hopeful. But I thank you for raising the issue of incarcerated gender violence survivors, because it is not widely recognized, and it is really important for the public to realize the plight of these victims.
Right, majority of the women that are incarcerated, I probably say some of them, they're innocent. They're innocent, and they're yet, sitting in prison, for whatever personal reasons they have, probably hurting their domestic partner or retaliating to violence, on themselves.
Yes.
So
And one of the things I've come to realize in so many of these cases, if that victim, we tend to use the word survivor these days, but I'm going to use victim right now because these are women who were horribly victimized. If that victim had received the protection by the criminal justice system that she needed early on, she never would have ended up committing the crime that she was convicted of, and never ended up serving that long sentence in prison. And in these cases, there is zero history of recidivism. When these women get out, they go back to being the law-abiding citizens they started out being, until they had the misfortune of entering into a severely abusive relationship.
right. I was also I read an article about Linda White.
Yes, Linda White was my client, our client. A group of us represented her. Again, an amazing, beautiful African-American woman who, in her 40s, entered a relationship with a man who was psycho, and he horribly abused her. I mean, he would tie her up and brutalize her, and sometimes neighbors would hear her screaming and come in, and ultimately she tried to get an order of protection. Nothing worked. The police did not respond the way they should, and she really had no choice and shot him and ended up serving a sentence of many years in prison. And when Linda came out, I mean, she was a model prisoner. And when she came out, she just resumed doing all of the wonderful things she had done before she fell under the control of this abuser. She had raised children, but she was also the primary caretaker of her disabled brother. And she went right back to being that woman she always was. What a waste.
Yeah.
That served so many years in prison.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So I wanted to touch. I'm sorry, Brown. I just want to also mention that I got word today from my manager right after work that just last week it was very unfortunate that there was an operator, a coworker that I work with, female operator, who, and I would put in the description later after the show is over. There's a link, a GoFundMe link to her. She died last week due to domestic violence. She was
so
a full-time operator, a very lovely woman. I'll leave the link into the description below to GoFundMe page. And it's sad. It's sad to hear that. I just got the news today. So it's touching, and things probably could have been prevented. You know what I mean? On that note,
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask Miss Rebecca has been hanging around here. It's not off topic, but I wanted to ask, have you ever been involved, maybe past relationships, boyfriends, ex-husbands, involved in a domestic dispute with your boyfriend, or have you ever experienced that yourself?
In my second marriage, I had a situation where we were early starting out. That he became a little aggressive, and at one point, he had pushed me very hard, and I retaliated, to him, and I let him know that if that ever repeated itself, that would be the end of the relationship as he saw it. And I think he saw that I was very adamant about that, and thank God that it never repeated itself. We did go to therapy, and that helped, I think, a lot. Therapy, because sometimes individuals, I don't think they end out wanting to hurt each other,
Right.
but I think that it evolves into something that one becomes very submissive and the other one becomes extremely aggressive, and these roles take place. And what I can't understand and have never been able to understand about domestic violence is that why does some women put up with it?
Right.
Is it because they don't know that help is out there? Is it because they don't have a support system? Is it because they think that this behavior is acceptable because maybe they saw their parents, or they've been taught that this is something that women endure?
Right.
I mean, it baffles me.
But we also got to remember too, it's not just females, because we have gay and lesbians out there too that go through the same
Absolutely.
situation, right, Ms. Dorchen?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. We've had clients from the LGBTQ community. I mean, most victims are women and girls. That's the vast majority.
Right.
And when there is serious injury, it's usually women and girls. But I think Rebecca, and it's so great to see you again.
It's my pleasure.
has referred a number of victims to my organization, and we've been able to assist them. And she poses the question that gets posed all of the time. Why does she stay? And I think also began to answer it in a way that's so very powerful. There's so much pressure on so many victims to stay. I mean, especially victims from traditional communities. They're expected to stick it out regardless. Very often, traditional religious providers encourage them to stay. Victims are blamed by communities and by their own families and told, you just have to be doing it differently. It's your fault. There are a lot of economic pressures on victims, and domestic violence tends to impoverish victims, and poverty, it can be a huge factor. And then fear is a factor. Rebecca and I assisted a young woman who was stalked by an abusive intimate partner, and he had a knife, and he slashed her brutally. So the time that domestic violence victims are at the greatest risk of death is the time that they are trying to extricate themselves, get out of, exit an abusive relationship. So there are many, many explanations. And then just to mention, many victims grew up in abusive situations. It was normalized, as you pointed out, Rebecca. And many want their children to have an intact family. So I'm always so impressed with the courage of victims who really say, I have to get out now, often for the sake of my children. That's what I hear. This is harming them, and but it is not an easy step to take at all.
No, not at all. Brown, you wanna step in?
Yeah, one of the things that recently that I was watching on the news too is even these young girls from the U.S. gymnastics. Hearing that they went to the FBI, hearing they told them their stories, and nothing was done for such a long time. That was
Right.
one of the things that I was like, unfortunately, like we're gentlemen, but if somebody was doing this to my daughter and I told the FBI and the FBI didn't do nothing, unfortunately, I'd probably be the one going to jail because I'm putting matters into my own hand, and that's silly to say. Probably wouldn't, but in my mind, I'm thinking, why aren't these things being handled properly? What is making? Is it the laws, Miss Leidholdt, that are preventing some of this stuff?
I don't really think it's principally the law. And I think when the violence takes the form of sexual abuse, a level of either disbelief in victims or victim blaming takes place, but especially when there's sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And honestly, especially when the perpetrator had some kind of credibility. In this case, the perpetrator was a doctor. There's so many cases, and people who are sexual predators tend to get themselves, they strategize to get themselves into positions where they have access to vulnerable people to prey on sexually. And clearly this doctor, to be the doctor of these young gymnasts, I mean, he did this for years. But it's about they are disbelieved, or their concerns or reports are ignored, and there is so much faith put in the perpetrator. The perpetrator is given so much credibility, and I think the problem is less the law than the culture and a whole set of beliefs. But we're beginning to see some change with this Me Too movement, with Simone Biles. When she spoke out, she educated the entire country. And we're seeing courageous survivors refusing to be shamed into silence. I mean, that didn't happen in the past.
Right.
And I see you're put up some photographs of a recent horrifying case of, we call it femicide, the murder of a young woman. Gabrielle Prieto. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Mhm.
Important. I mean, this is a horrible way to educate a country about domestic violence and femicide, but that has happened in the course of this tragic murder of this beautiful, vital, intelligent young woman.
We have this new event that has been surfacing the news just recently over the Utah police over there with Brian Laundrie, the laundry case with the
Yes.
girl missing, and they found her body there. Also domestic. They found he was very domestic person. So that's another thing. I mean, it's out there, guys. You know, please, I'm going to attach in the description some real helpful links to the national domestic number. If you need a contact, there will be some links in there, as well as Ms. Dorchen's, I believe her hotline, or she's linked up to a few of these links I have here too, that I will put in the description after the taping. Please check it out. If we got to break the silence. That's what this title is all about. Break the silence. Speak up if you see, you hear, something's going on in your next door neighbor. It's probably is. You know what I mean? It's probably is. And so, it's very important that we do something about this. It's the right thing to do. You know what I mean? So,
Yes. Well, we're really talking about bystander intervention. And it was interesting in looking at some of the footage of the investigation of Gabrielle Prieto's, I think it's fair to say, murder at this point, and it's being treated as a murder. There were bystanders who really did the right thing. And there was one call made. There was, I think it was a couple in a car, and they saw the van and they slowed down, and they saw that Gabrielle was being slapped repeatedly by somebody who was clearly her intimate partner, and they notified law enforcement. At that point in time, they described exactly what they were observing. They actually recorded the van. And unfortunately, that did not save her life. But I was so impressed with what those bystanders did. They didn't just drive off. They didn't remain silent. They tried to intervene as best they could. And we all need to be like that. So bystander intervention is crucially important.
right. I agree. So, Rebecca, I wanted to ask, thank you for sharing that detailed information. I didn't know that. And Rebecca and I are related. She is my
Yes.
aunt. And so, I didn't know that. And, I'm sorry for that you had to go through that.
And Flip, let me tell you, a lot of people don't know things because women tend to keep those things secret because they're
Right.
shameful to us.
Right.
They're very shameful. When Dorchen mentioned one of my students in the class, Dorchen, I always think back to her, and I remember she didn't give me any type of signs that she was being abused, that she had any problems, and I'm trained to observe them. In teaching them the class, I observe them, and I'm a good judge of character, and I never picked up that she was abused by her partner to the point that she was almost murdered.
Wow.
Murdered. It was savage. It was just horrific. And she's disabled to this day,
Yes.
and I couldn't pick that up. And I'm observant, and I feel very bad, but and then for you to say that, you're my nephew and you never knew that,
Right.
that comes to show that people don't talk about these shameful moments. I guess women see that as shameful, or not being able to control the situation. And that's
Right.
bad. We got to be able to talk about these things and express them and say, you know what, this is not right. You know,
Yes.
this is not acceptable behavior. This is not love. This is
No.
not how
Yeah.
love is expressed.
Right.
Because a lot of these women, they tend to think that this person loves them, and
Yeah.
they try and work things out, and it's not love. It's something very sick,
Yeah.
and it's really sad. And your title for the show, I must commend you. It is excellent. Break the
Break
silence.
the silence. You got to break the
Absolutely.
silence. You know,
Yeah.
so those who are watching or join later, please leave a comment in the comment. Like it, subscribe if you haven't already. Brown, you want to add anything?
No, I just, I think it's a very important topic. I knew I had a friend that went through some domestic violence, and she was smart enough. Well, I think what I should say is she had the support system around him. And
Right.
that is so important. So, um, I think a lot of these women that are going through these things, they don't have that support system, like we mentioned earlier. Um, it was something that family is so important, and I could just imagine how many people that don't have the support system, are involved with somebody. Like we said earlier, the financial responsibilities. Where am I going to go? Who's going to take care of me? What am I going to do if I leave them? I can't do this or that. Um, Support system is important, and um, I think that's
I
the world. Yeah,
I wholeheartedly agree. Family support makes all the difference. I mean, we can educate our young people about the telltale signs of intimate partner violence. And maybe I'll just say some of the telltale signs. There's something called the power and control wheel out there. And if you Google power and control, you'll see it. But the telltale signs involve someone who uses coercion and threats,
yeah,
someone who intimidates you, someone who puts you down, tries to destroy your self-esteem, calls you names, someone who tries to isolate you, and that person who isolates you may be saying, I love you so much, I want to be with you all the time, I don't want you to spend time with your friends, just with me. But isolation, using isolation as a telltale sign.
Right.
Someone who shifts all the responsibility for the problematic behavior onto you, minimizing, denying, and blaming. If you have children, someone who begins to use the children as a pawn or a weapon against you. Someone who tries to destroy your economic viability, either won't let you go to school, won't let you work, or perhaps wants you to work and then demands that you turn over all of your earnings. And when there are very stereotypical gender roles, the person who thinks that you should stay in the kitchen, do all the cooking, take care of the children, that's not part of his responsibility. I mean, these are all telltale signs of domestic violence. But I so agree with you. When victims have family support systems, they can get out. When they have that family support, it makes all of the difference in the world. And so many cases, it's a lack of family support that makes victims vulnerable to the power and control of intimate partner abusers.
I agree. Just strictly on my topic for the YouTube channel for this segment was shame, silence. You know what I mean? So these are terms that kind of lead to I guess you want to say that lead to a domestic abuse. You know what I mean? Verbal abuse, domestic abuse. They all kind of add each other to the same category. So the blame game, the manipulation between having control, who's responsible, the cruel and calculated gaslighting, you're nothing worth keeping, you belong to me. These are things that you can tell. Like you said, the telltale. You have to learn how to kind of observe that. So yeah, it's
Yes. And it
Right.
feels like passion. At the beginning, it feels like passion.
Yeah.
And these abusive perpetrators of intimate partner abuse, they tend to find their victim and they move in so powerfully. But very often the victim is going to think, well, he just loves me so much, he just can't, he can't stand to be away from me for 1 minute. But it's a bad sign if that happens.
Yeah.
I
We,
just-
we need to get this out somehow. I mean, we really do. It's so important. Like I said, this is some of the things on a day-to-day basis that we don't see. It's behind closed doors. We do need to break the silence. We need it to come out. And that's one of the neat things about our show. We want to put things out there. Our title coming in is always kind of funny and humorous. One of the things that we like about this is we have a platform where we can put things out there. And it started out to be a bunch of fun and games. And then you run into real topics like this. This is real. This happens. And we need to do something about it. And this is our way of trying to get it out. So if there's anybody out there that needs help, they can message us. We'll do what we can to help. That's what we put the show on for. Me and Flip don't always agree, but one thing we do agree upon is getting whatever message is out there that we can help somebody. This is what we like to do.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
So on that note, Ms. Dorchen, I know you're out in the East Coast. Do you know or have you probably have already, but do you have any contacts over here on the West Side? Perhaps you might want to throw out there. They can probably get a hold contact maybe.
Well, there's one great resource that now exists nationally, and they're called the Family Justice Centers. Have you heard of the Family Justice Centers?
I haven't.
I haven't either.
So it actually comes from California. There is this fantastic leader, a former prosecutor, a man named Casey Gwynn, who basically he did a lot of amazing things. His family had a history of domestic violence, and he was very committed to ending it, to protecting survivors. And he said, if only we can bring together all of the services and support for survivors under one roof, along with the prosecutorial wing, we can really accomplish a lot. So survivors don't have to go from organization to organization. And so prosecutors are going to have the support they need for a real holistic response. And so they're in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in almost every major city of the country, in every county of New York City, there is a Family Justice Center. So if you could just Google Family Justice Center, and Casey runs something based in California and San Diego called the Family Justice Center Alliance. The Family Justice Centers is one stop shopping, so to speak, for victims of abuse. You can go in there, you can get counseling, you can get civil legal services, you can speak with a police officer or a prosecutor. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I'm looking here. There's one here in San Jose. So, and that's where I'm from, San Jose, California. Family Justice Center. So, yep, that's great. Good to know. We'll put the links out. That's for sure.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So, I really appreciate you, Dorchen, coming out and taking your time again. I appreciate that. Brown, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, if there's anything we could do on this side, we're all open arms. We'll put links up on the site and whatever we can do to help out, and even for our fans of the East Coast, West Coast, around the world, because we're being syndicated in Australia, we'd love to help.
Oh, definitely.
Well, I want to say, we know we're making progress. Rebecca and I know we're making progress. When there are men, good men, who step up to the plate and say, this is a serious problem, this has got to stop, because it is people like you who are really going to change the mindset of other men. It's not going to be Rebecca and me. And I just want to applaud you for this program. I want to applaud you for your commitment to this issue. And please keep up the good work and great programming.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you again.
And keep the fight. Yeah.
I definitely appreciate you coming out and taking the time, Miss Rebecca. Thank you so much, for sharing that information with us. You're always
pleasure.
welcome on the show. Ms. Dorchen, we'll love to have you back on the show at any time. Really appreciate the input, the information you've let out. Your great success. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate everything you're doing. And thanks to Trevor. Yeah, Trevor up there. Thank you for the support, brother.
Yeah, he's in the comments. So, again, you guys, I know it's late out there in the East Coast. It's a little early out here, but it's getting late. You guys hit the chat, the comment later on down the road. Like, subscribe, what you see, and come back and drop in and say hello to us again from time to time. We really appreciate that, and hope you guys take some educational learning process out of this. I really appreciate that. You guys, I'm Flip. Thank you for tuning in to Generation Flip. Brown, Rebecca, Miss Lynch, DORCHEN, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll catch you in the next episode.